I had rather died in detention than facing trial by biased judge or courts. This is the position of Nnamdi Kanu following the happenings of the few weeks or days after his impromptu summon. It is quite very clear that Nnamdi Kanu is being persecuted by all sense of judgment. Nnamdi Kanu is facing persecution and not prosecution, because you cannot continue indefinite detention of someone whose case had been determined by the courts. He had been tried by the courts, and courts have passed their judgments, have ruled on this case. So the continued detention of Nnamdi Kanu is a clear indication of gross violations and non-compliance to the rule of law. Even the Nigerian own laws have been violated by the state. This is quite unfortunate. This have informed the reason why Nnamdi Kanu has to make this decision, of course, known to the public, that what is passing through is persecution targeted at his person and by virtue of his ethnicity as an Igbo man. This is purely true by his own perception, and of course many other persons have such concerns and have raised such concerns about what kind of law that guarantees his continued detention after a competent court of law has ruled in his favor. It is quite interesting that we consider this development, and this have prompted him to make a very clear position, of course, before the public domain, and this will interest you to know. But let me say this for the world to know: I will not succumb to any trial conducted by any judge or court whose jurisdiction does not pass constitutional muster. Not now, not ever. This is the position of Nnamdi Kanu in the open letter written to the public to get the public aware of what is going on with his trial and the circumstances surrounding that. Now, I have been compelled by the events of the past few days to take this unusual step of writing this open letter for the singular purpose of calling the attention of the general public to the serial executive and judicial frauds being perpetrated against me since my extraordinary rendition in 2021, Kanu said. This is quite interesting, and honestly, people have argued that his continued detention is baseless. There is no any law or any reference to the law that guarantees that when a court, an appellate court of law, has ruled a case and the executive or the politicians or those with vested interests will sit on it and say nobody dares, nobody can talk, we are above the law, and it is only what we permit will happen. It can expect that such society to be a democratic society ruled or governed by the principles of law. This is quite unfortunate, and that is the position of what is happening with Nnamdi Kanu and his trial. He went further to say that recall that in a judgment entered on March 1st, 2027, the Federal High Court in Abuja ruled that the indigenous people of Biafra is not an unlawful group. This was ruled in Abuja High Court, and eventually this landmark ruling made by courts before it turned unjust emanated in criminal proceedings that required proof beyond reasonable doubts, and in which the federal government and my humble self presented our respective cases. This is the position of Nnamdi Kanu through his Attorney General. He has made it very clear, putting a public notice and awareness over what he's going through, that he's not going to succumb on any kind of intimidation or subjugations. His trial was very clear and was overwhelming. So, setting aside such judgment or verdict ruled in his favor, of course, International Tribunal has also ruled in his favor, calling for his unconditional release. Perhaps some vested interests are being engineered by the British government and the rest of them are still keeping him, not minding that Nnamdi Kanu has won his case in Nigeria and of course in international tribunals. The inhuman and degrading treatment meted out to the applicants amounts to a brazen violation of the applicant's fundamental right to dignity of his person and threat to life. Under Section 34, Subsection 1A of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended, Kanu said, in a responsible and well-ordered society run by a responsible government, this judgment is sufficient to have ended the lengthy detention and encourage the federal government to constructively engage me on the issue of self-determination, agitation that triggered this whole saga. That's Nnamdi Kanu is saying that the government of Nigeria should not shy away from engaging him in legal combat as it has to do with his position for self-determination. So all these distractions or whatever they are trying to hook up does not count. Now let them engage him constructively in the issue of self-determination, whether it is not within the ambit of the law, in pursuant of his protected right to self-determination. As he made it very clear that it is my right to agitate for Biafra. And if he is passing this persecution because of his fundamental right protected under international laws, now what becomes of Nigeria when it comes to the compliance to the rule of law? Nigeria is a signatory to the United Nations. And the very reason why even the Mr. Trump administration have indicted the United Nations of being biased and insensitive or irresponsible to or alive to their own duties and obligations to the member states. Rather than dispensing justice, they are selective in their undertakings. In previous months or years, the United Nations group responsible for the defense of fundamental human rights have written to Nigerian government giving them ultimatum that after the expiration of 180 days, they should unconditionally release Nnamdi Kanu before the 180 days expiration. But after that, thereafter, they have not done anything as toothless bulldogs or dogs as they have been described. It is quite unfortunate. So their sentiments or whatever politics they are playing have not helped the world to resolve certain issues bordering on gross violations of fundamental human rights and abuses across the nations, most importantly African, when it has to do with the African race. And it's been considered as in isolation. It doesn't matter to them. It's quite unfortunate. With this foregoing, Nnamdi Kanu has made his position known that under no circumstances should he be subjected to a biased judge or courts that does lack the jurisdiction to dispense justice and follow the rule of law and compliance to the verdict that have been ruled in his favor. Well, let's have your own take regarding this development. It is quite touching and very serious case. Of course, he will not die in detention because he has the right to live, and his fundamental right must at all costs be protected and respected by the Nigerian government, regardless of whatever interests they're trying to protect. Nigeria today is agog. Nigeria is restive. Nigeria is boiling. Nnamdi Kanu was not responsible for the influx, of course, of ISWAP, Boko Haram in the southwest and the rest of them. You are seeing the reality. He reveal all these developments, but people, because of their hatred, do not pay attention. But today, these realities are unfolding before us. He said that they are planning to overrun the entire Nigerian state. Today, Nnamdi Kanu has been vindicated, a very strong reason to discontinue his continued detention. He said it. What he said is happening around us. In fact, not just in the north, it has gotten down to the south, that the state governors from the southwest are now mobilizing, of course, fire brigade approach on how to protect the region and forge a common front to fight these terrorists. They are already in Yoruba land region. So if they have taken cautions, if they have taken heed to what Nnamdi Kanu has been hammering on, that wouldn't have gotten to this point that they are now running, of course, when it is almost too late, because they have occupied several bushes and they have established their camps, only waiting to expand and unleash mayhem. It is quite unfortunate, but that is the reality staring at us. So with all these foregoings and many other evidence abounding, you cannot understand that Nnamdi Kanu was just speaking nothing but the truth, not just in the interest of Biafrans, but in the collective interest of all ethnic nationalities within Nigeria today. They are living, of course, in that reality. They are living in that time which he once foretold several years ago. But unfortunately, they paid lip service to that. Less attention to what he's saying. Today, Nigeria is grappling with such insecurity to the point that even Abuja is being threatened today. That you couldn't have ever imagined that the Boko Haram, those proponents of Islamic Caliphate or jihadists, are now deploying military-grade drones to fight the Nigerian government. Most of the attacks, recent attacks, military-grade drones are being used. You see, it's a sophisticated drones or armories that not ordinary Boko Haram could use, which means there are vested interests foreign interests who are interested in taking over Nigeria and continue the exploitation. So this Nnamdi Kanu has made clear ahead of time, but unfortunately, because of sentiments, ethnic and religious sentiments, they failed to listen. The reality is, of course, has caught up with us, and eventually there is no way of escape. So you keeping him there does not add up, does not make any difference. Rather, you are emboldening those who are bent in overrunning the entire Nigerian state, and perhaps that will not be allowed to happen. So Nnamdi Kanu has maintained his case that any biased judge or biased courts will not ever try him, not now or ever. So that is a clear indication. And the Nigerian judiciary, of course, has been on trial over Nnamdi Kanu case. Endless prosecution or persecution will be determined in time, but the reality is that Nnamdi Kanu trial and detention has a time limit, and this we understand that such trial could not continue because it amounts to gross violations of his fundamental human rights and the right to life. Whatever be the case, justice must certainly prevail. If not now, later in the course of time. But then, don't forget that whatever goes around comes around. Justice must be dispensed regardless of anyone's personal opinion or interest. When the Committee of Nations are watching, as they have released this open letter, people are watching, following the events, and Nigerian government and the judicial or criminal justice system has been on trial as far as Nnamdi Kanu case is concerned.